Oh, sometimes I hate being a tall person. Hi everyone, welcome back. First of all, thanks to everyone who watched my video on map making last week. It was my most popular video by far, so I'm looking forward to making a follow-up to it in the next couple of weeks. For now though, we're going to dive back into our How to Homebrew series and pick up with designing quests. Quests are of course what your adventuring party are going to be spending most of their time doing in your games, so if you're thinking about designing an adventure or a campaign, it's a good idea to make sure that you are a confident and competent quest designer. I sound really nasally today. I feel like I sound...
Let's talk about quests.
So I'm going to be aware of that. Instead, I'm going to try and speak with my chest. Really get in there and be like, yeah. Quests. Quests can range from really simple encounters to grand, overarching schemes that are brimming with thematic tension and intrigue. As far as I'm concerned, and I'm not an authority on the issue, there's no magic, foolproof method for coming up with engaging and original quests, but there are a few useful things to know before you start. First, and this will be pretty much what this video covers, there are lots of different types of quests, and even subtypes within a lot of those types, and it's worth knowing what they are, what their strengths are, where they have some pitfalls, what things you might want to watch out for if you're designing a particular type of quest, and where and when you might want to fit a particular type of quest into your overall adventure. That way you can be sure about what it is that you're trying to build before you just start trying to build something. So for this video, what we're going to do is go through the different types of quests according to me. It's by no means a comprehensive list, but it is how I would break them down into different... Someone's delivering something. It wasn't for me. What was I saying? Yes, I'm going to go through the different types of quests and go through some of the details at a very high level without going into too much depth about each to give you an idea as to when and where you might want to use those particular types of quests. Let's do it! Starting off with the fetch quest. Poor old fetch quest. It gets a bad rap, but the humble fetch quest is a staple of any in the adventuring profession. The fetch quest consists of a super simple premise: go to place, get thing, profit. It's true that you will want to avoid leaning too heavily on this type of quest too often, but it might surprise you to learn that some of our favourite big adventure stories are just fetch quests in disguise. Almost every Harry Potter book is a fetch quest of some kind, whether it's getting Philosopher's Stones or Goblets of Fire or Deathly Hallows or Horcruxes or Snitches or whatever it might be. Sauron is basically on a giant fetch quest to get the ring. Everyone else in Lord of the Rings is kind of on a reverse fetch quest. It's like putting something back, which is really just a fetch quest as well, but it's just sort of done backwards. To gain power over the universe, you must gather together 6 infinity stones and put them on a magic fancy glove. Fetch quest. There are, again according to me, 2 types of fetch quests. Blind fetch quests and... I should have thought this through. Non-blind fetch quests. A blind fetch quest is when the people or person who is going on the quest know what it is that they need to find, maybe only even in vague terms, but they don't know how they're going to find it or where they need to go to find it or anything like that. And so this leads to them having to do a bit of research to try and find out more information about the quest that they're going on, or to keep an eye out for clues as to the whereabouts of the item that they're looking for as they're progressing along other quest lines. You can often get more out of a fetch quest this way and use it as a vehicle to deliver some important plot points or bits of lore as they discover more about the quest as they progress along. Non-blind fetch quests, God I hate that, on the other hand are simpler because the party knows exactly what it is that they need to find and how they're going to get it as well.
You must travel to the ancient crypt of the Howl family, and there within the tomb you will find the corpse of Lord Bastian Howl. In his breast pocket you will find a small pouch of coins. Take 10 of those coins and bring them back to me. Just because he's dead doesn't mean he can back out of a bet. Here, let me mark it on your map.
A non-blind, God I hate that so much, fetch quest is a perfectly acceptable premise for a one-shot or even the first session of a campaign. Any situation where you want to keep things simple and streamlined and avoid your players getting sidetracked or distracted along the way. The puzzle Puzzles are somewhat divisive. People tend to either love them or hate them in their role-playing games. I love them. Now let me start by saying that good puzzle design is difficult, and you should not feel bad at all for taking puzzle ideas from elsewhere and adapting them and implementing them in your own story. There are some pretty good forums online where people have created loads of different types of puzzles, and you can find a lot of those with just a simple Google search. I might do a separate video on puzzle design at some point. I used to work in an escape room and designed a few different puzzles for some different projects, and probably learned a thing or two that might be useful to know. Yeah, let me know if that's something that you'd be interested in. Of course, there are lots of different types of puzzles, from giant chess sets, Harry Potter, to riddles, Harry Potter, to even just fancy locked doors. More than any other piece of advice I can give you about puzzles, first I would say check with your players that they actually like them. It can get quite awkward if you're the DM and you're just sitting there while your players are bashing their heads against the table trying to figure out a series of acronyms that you've made. When you are first designing puzzles for your games, you should start with really simple concepts with easily solvable answers. Even if you think your players are just going to breeze through it and figure it all out straight away, there's nothing lost if they do. They'll feel like really smart cookies, and usually they'll give you an indication if it's something that they'd like to see more of in the future, and you can slowly turn up the difficulty as you go along. The mystery! Now, mysteries can sometimes be quite similar to puzzles, or even contain a puzzle. Quests can, of course, contain other quests. Mysteries are one of my favourite types of quests because they really fit well with my style as a GM. They're usually quite player-led. You start with an inciting incident, a murder, an attack on the party, a theft of something, an NPC going missing, or an arrow with an attached note being fired into a tree as the party are moving past. Something to trigger the party to start asking questions. The important thing with a mystery is it needs to have an answer. You need to be able to solve the mystery. Some GMs, like some writers, are what are referred to as pantsers, so they fly by the seat of their pants and they lay out the story directly ahead of what their players decide to do. Sometimes I do this. Being a pantser is a completely legitimate way to be a GM, but it doesn't really work that well for a mystery. Your role as the GM when you're running a mystery is to be the keeper of clues. You should have some predetermined clues that the players will find that can point them in the right direction, and you can use these clues to reward players' investigations into different aspects of the mystery, or to just gently nudge them along if you feel like they're stalling out a little bit. Try to avoid letting your players talk themselves around in circles for too long. If they seem like they're really stuck or they've missed something important, it's okay to give them that little push, but do give them enough time to have a good crack at figuring out themselves. The dungeon raid. The classic dungeon raid. Whether it's an orc fortress, a mind flayer hive, or a castle full of vampires, we all love a good old dungeon crawl. A dungeon will of course often contain smaller quests, but the general idea of a dungeon raid as a quest format is to progress from room to room, unlocking doors, avoiding traps, clearing out enemies, and eventually getting to some kind of a boss encounter with the promise of loot or a reward at the end. The 5-room dungeon method is a pretty good way to start thinking about designing dungeons, and once you're comfortable with it, you can then start to play around with the format a bit more. The 5-room dungeon method is widely considered the de facto means of creating a good dungeon or a self-contained story structure. I won't go into a lot of detail about it here because there are tons of other resources out there on this subject that will all explain much further than I can in this video. In the simplest of terms though, the 5-room dungeon method follows this layout of 5 rooms or encounters: the entrance or guardian, the puzzle or role-playing challenge, the trick or setback, the climax, big battle or conflict, the reward, revelation or twist. The boss raid. There is often a boss at the end of a dungeon, but the boss raid itself can be considered a type of quest. You could be journeying to the top of a mountain to slay a dragon, or storming a town to liberate the people there from their evil overlord. The boss raid as a quest type is about as simple as a fetch quest. Go to place, kill boss, profit. Roleplay quests. Roleplay quests are extremely varied, so much so that I couldn't think of a way to break them down any further. Again, this is a type of quest that you want to make sure your players know what they're getting into beforehand and that they are actually up for engaging in a role-playing quest before you create one. It could be meeting with a powerful political figure where your party has to try to get their help. Often this will result in the party acquiring another quest. You could call this the quid pro quo. Quid pro quo! Usually a role-playing quest will boil down to trying to convince someone of something. or to influence the actions of another character in some way. As an example, I had a party who decided somewhat out of the blue that they were going to form a band. They played a gig and had a good time, but later down the line when they arrived in a new city, I introduced a music competition. In between sessions, they came up with a song and had it all worked out with lighting effects and a dance. I came up with the performances for the NPCs at the competition and used it as an opportunity to deliver a message to one of the players in the form of a musical play. Pretty much the whole session was this giant musical performance skill challenge between different characters, and the players just scraped a victory. It was like the Buffy musical episode of our campaign. They met some important figures in the city, and they won some renown as the victors of the contest. The Character Quest. That brings me neatly onto character quests. Often your players will come to you at the start of your campaign with a character in mind, and you will ask them to tell you if their character has a goal, what their ideals are, if they have any particular bonds or flaws or fears or hopes or desires. If you don't pay much attention to this stuff as a GM, I really recommend that you do. It gives you so much to work with when you're building quests further down the line. If you can tie most of your quests in some way to at least one of the character's backstory, even just in a really minor sense, that can be a really great way to encourage that particular player to take a few moments for themselves in the limelight of the story and really flesh out the personality of their character. But sometimes you'll want to create an entire quest that is centered squarely on one of your player characters. This should be done sparingly, but when you do, this is the time to pull out all of the stops. The most important elements of your character quest are the hook and the payoff. The hook should immediately indicate to the player in question that this storyline directly involves them and their personal backstory. It should pose to them a question, promise them an answer, or challenge something that they always thought to be true. If you can, allow your player to be the quest giver for the rest of the party. Allow them to convince the rest of the party that it's important to them and it's something that they should all go and do together. But also do be mindful of the comfort level of your players in regards to role-playing and such. The payoff comes at the tail end of the quest, of course, and it should have a meaningful impact of some kind on that player character. Maybe they get a magic item, maybe they rescue someone who was important to them, or they get revenge for something that happened to them in the past. Whatever it is, make sure that it directly pays off what it is that you've been setting up. And if there's an opportunity to do so, this is also a good time to begin the setup for the next leg of their personal story. Set up a new mystery, or provide the location of a dungeon, or drop the name of a boss that will be coming up in a few sessions' time. Make sure you make some use of that momentum that you've been building up to this point, and use it to keep your players excited for what's coming next. The side quest.
Here, your frying pan.
A lot of quests in your games will fall into this category and will have a comparatively low priority level. Contrary to what you might think, this is not the only home for fetch quests or mini boss raids. In fact, I would suggest if you can, you should avoid making your side quests a series of find X number of things or kill Y number of other things. If you must create a quest with that kind of format, it seems counterintuitive, but you should go bigger rather than smaller. Think about finding infinity stones rather than finding magic acorns. Think about slaying dragons rather than killing kobolds. Although obviously don't actually send your players on a quest to collect the 6 forever gems and the forever hat so that they can defeat Ganos. Side quests should be simple, yes, but they don't have to be the same kind of quest over and over and over. You could provide the party with the location of a dungeon through rumours that are circulating around town. They don't have to go there, but they could, and they might find something interesting if they do. A good example of a side quest I ran recently was an island covered in fog that the party had been told they would have to sail past and might be dangerous. They were told the fog was unnaturally thick and made sailing there difficult. So, of course, they asked about the island and the cause of the fog. Wouldn't you know it, the island is cursed, but there is supposedly some kind of treasure hidden there that people sometimes go looking for. Rather than live with the FOMO, they rode to the island and discovered the source of the fog, where they had to fight some beasties and dispel the curse. Simple, but effective. The main quest.
You're finally awake.
Conversely, your main quest should be larger and grander in scale, but this is actually where you can play it a little bit more fast and loose with the details. Whether it's the overarching quest for the whole campaign, or just the current main quest on the party's to-do list, you should have some simple elements worked out from the offset. Why is the most important question to answer? The answer can be simple, loot, or it can be complex, to discover the source of the undead plague. First thing your players need to know is why they are on on this quest. What they're doing exactly, where they're going, and how they're going to succeed can all come later. First and foremost, your party needs a reason to be involved so that they keep searching for ways to progress that quest while they're engaged in other tasks. If your players are big note takers, you can pepper little bits of information about this quest throughout the other tasks that they take on. If they aren't really big on note taking, you might have to trim the fat a little bit from your quest and just put some of the cards on the table directly. Why is it important that they do this? What is the ultimate goal? How will they succeed? Answer all of these questions early if you can. I personally quite like to let my players lead the story, but it can sometimes lead to a feeling of aimlessness if their goal isn't really clear to them. So don't shy away from reinforcing that when you feel like you have to. Remind your players what their goal is, and importantly, remind them why. Give them a sense that they are still working towards that goal, even if they feel they've gone off in a bit of a tangent, and help them to decide how best to progress it. Random events.
Mate is tired now.
Random events, when properly managed, can make your setting feel so much more alive. There are tables in the source books that you can use to generate random encounters or random dungeons that can be useful for when your players are traveling or if they've been forced to wait for something. But random events are more than just random encounters with enemies, or at least they can be. Your party could have an encounter with a mysterious wandering merchant who sells powerful artifacts for very unusual payments, like the color of your hair or a spot of luck. It could be a storm that rolls in and brings with it dangerous environmental conditions that your party has to traverse. I usually keep a list of random things that could happen, and I update it from time to time when things get used up. They range from mundane discoveries to encounters with gods, and each one on the list has a different % chance that it will occur based on the roll of a dice. I will say it definitely takes a bit of trial and error to get the balance right, and I've definitely found myself in a position where too many crazy things have happened in quite quick succession, and that then felt quite contrived. But by trying to make sure that you only have 1 or 2 crazy things that can happen at a time on the roll of a D100, that can go some way towards avoiding that. Remember, you can always swap out results and change that balance, or even manipulate the rolls as the GM to be adaptive to the situations that your players create. I am of the opinion that if you as the GM think, oh, this would be a great moment for this shady character to show up and offer the party this bargain, you don't need to let the dice decide if that's when it happens, you can just do it. Fudging rolls is a whole can of worms that I'm not fully prepared to open right now, so I will leave it at that, but that is my thought on that particular issue. Alright, so we've talked a lot about the different types of quests that there are, at least according to me, and some things to consider about each of them. Next time we look at this subject, I'll be going into detail about the role of the quest giver.
Will you help me, dearie?
And how to achieve the perfect setup and payoff for your quests. As always, if you have any questions or requests for future videos, or any ideas about some of the things that we talked about in this video, please do let me know. I would love to hear them, so leave a comment down below. Also, if you did enjoy this video, go ahead and give it a like. I generally don't and won't make a habit of asking, but apparently it is one of the best things that you can do to get YouTube to start suggesting my videos to other people, so if you did, I would very much appreciate it. That's all for now. Stay safe out there, and happy adventuring. First and foremost, your players need it. Just realized I have this mask on.